Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about inspiring and empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to rekindle that fire in your belly so you can step back into life with more clarity, purpose, and excitement. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Krista O'Reilly Davi-Digui. Krista is the founder of A Life in Purpose, writer, and joyful living advocator. She helps I wrote this down because I thought it was so gorgeous. She helps messy humans quiet the noise of perfectionism, comparison, and fear so that they can show up fully in their imperfect and beautiful lives. Thank you so much, Krista, for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So for the mums that don't know you, Krista, could you take some time to tell us your story and how you came to be doing the work that you do?
Well, I am a messy human and I have a lifelong struggle with anxiety and depression. Um, I I struggled a lot with certain illnesses and chronic pain, and I say that it was hard work to live. I am one of those people that have had to work hard to live, and so I myself needed to learn how to make peace with messy, how to see differently, and how to um, learn that even joy and pain can coexist, and see that I could, in fact, have a beautiful life and a joyful life and a purposeful life, even though people die and there's pain in the world and all of that. Also, a highly sensitive person, and I think I carried the weight of the world on my shoulders from a really young, tender age. So really, yeah, it was my stubborn determination to find a way to live,
Yeah.
and and to thrive, definitely, in a world that it didn't feel easy to me, and yeah.
Your message and your way of speaking and sharing your journey obviously resonates with thousands of people because, and I imagine mostly women, because you have a huge following. So how did you move from that place and that journey to actually sharing it online? When did that start to happen?
Well, I actually stayed at home and raised my babies and homeschooled. I was at home for 20 years, homeschooling for 15. And while I realized when my oldest son was heading towards high school, I had kind of gone into a depression again. And I realized for the first time that I require a learning curve in my life to be whole. And so anyway, I decided at 40 to go back to school. At the worst possible time of life. I was in horrible, just agonizing pain, awaiting a hip replacement. My dad had terminal cancer, and I was kind of trying to see him as much as I could. We had already lost my mom to cancer, and I was homeschooling, and it did not make sense on any logical realm that I should go back to school, but I felt very drawn to it. And so it became a lifeline actually for me in a time where I might have otherwise drowned. It was really a dark season in my life. And after we buried my dad, and I was recovering from a difficult surgery, I went back into this dark place. And I felt like my studies, which were in holistic health and functional nutrition, they really anchored me, and they kept reminding me, just do the next right thing, just do the next right thing. So that's sort of the long-winded version, but my work was really birthed out of that place.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes from a lifelong of struggle and learning to see my worth and learning to love myself, but really in that dark place, my mission was birthed. And really, put very, very simply, it was simply to offer the light of hope and encouragement to other people.
Yeah.
Other people like me. And and it came out of that. And so I started my work in in the stages of my own healing, you know, like, I mean, certainly we heal in layers, right? So I had already done some healing work over years previous, but it was a really significant, profound season of healing for me. And that's where I sort of began to tentatively take those first steps and begin to write, and also to begin to serve with my, you know, offering workshops and client work and all of that. But yeah.
I think that that journey of intense, you know, or a dark time or a grief, where I know for myself, where you can start to focus out and be of service to other people, it takes some of the attention and some of that heaviness, well, I found, off my own shoulders. The more I focused out and did things for other people, the more it gave me a sense of purpose and helped me move forward. And it sounds like very much like that's what's happened for you as well.
Yeah, and that is true. And I'm definitely a purpose-driven person. And also, I think part of my wiring really is to scan and see what could be made better, and then to want to contribute, want to help, you know, make the world a better place, a kinder place, a safer place, a more accepting place, whatever. So I feel like I'm very motivated by that.
Yeah. I saw you did a post that was, what if all I want is a mediocre life? And that went quite viral, didn't it? I was on your website. There was, well over 600 comments on that post. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because, you know, within this series, I talk about being extraordinary, and that means different things to different people. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear more about your response to that post and what drove you to write it.
Well, I wrote that post, actually, I think I wrote it after only 6 months of having started my blog. So I was very new to writing. And as I mentioned, I was very much also in the healing process myself. So I wrote that post in tears one day. And I often write for my own healing. Like, I will say without guilt that when I write, it's as much for me as it is for you. It's sort of selfish in that regard, but not really, though. We can all learn and grow from each other's work. But I need it. So writing is just one of the ways that I process emotion and grief or fear or whatever. And also, it's one of the ways that I scan for hope. And so I wrote that post in tears one day, just still wrestling and grappling with this idea of, or what I would say is sort of this truth that I can't measure up and keep up, no matter how hard I try. I've never been able to, and I was trying hard. Like, I am a recovering perfectionist, really crazy high standards for myself that have softened over the past 7 years. But just this awareness that I would never be enough, ever. I couldn't be a good enough mom or wife or friend or anything, because I was constantly trying to measure up to this impossible standard. And sometimes it was an external standard. There was sometimes comparison where I'd see other people and it just, life seemed to come easy for them or whatever. But for the most part, it was very much this internal self-imposed standard, that no matter how much I did, I could just see the gap. And it was so that, living with that very perfectionist mindset is so defeating, right? Like, it just destroys us. And so I was just using that little post as one of the ways that I do, processing through my own emotion and coming to the conclusion that I could choose to just say, it's enough. What I have is enough. Who I am is enough. So I honestly didn't think that anybody beyond, my 39 readers at the time, most of whom were my siblings, I didn't think people would read it. And it went viral twice, actually, around the world. So the first time it went through the UK and like Europe, and then the second time some minimalist bloggers in the States picked it up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was amazing, the response. Some people really don't like my work. They really don't. They think it's all about staying small and like, but those aren't my people, because the people who, like me, have fought for life, the people who have just wrestled so hard against perfectionist standards, the people who have lived in despair, who have really walked through hard bouts of anxiety and depression, they get it. They get it.
Mm.
But in addition, there were men and humans of all walks of life around the world responding and saying, I'm so tired of feeling like I need to keep up. You know, they're tired of the race, the hustle, the sense of like it's never enough. And it was shocking to me, the response.
Yeah.
Like shocking, humbling and shocking and interesting and all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's, and she talks a lot about that, pesky perfectionism that we so often just sits on our shoulders I think for
Yeah.
most people at some point in their lives or another. And that feeling of never being able to measure up or never being good enough. So, if you're talking to women who come to you with that sitting on their shoulders, what do you say to them? What are the first steps to trying to shed that heavy weight?
Yeah. Well, I think that really the core of the work that I do today is all about, like, I would call it helping people put down steep, strong roots of self-awareness and self-compassion. When I started my work, it was more in health. People come to me with health challenges, and I'm helping them address that. But what would always happen, even if somebody would come to me because they have allergies or they have gut issues, inevitably we would end up delving into this idea of self-worth and like, what do you want and who are you, and where shame and guilt and all these things show up in our lives. And so I just slowly started to just move and just focus solely on that, because it's because it's been the biggest place of transformation and healing for myself, but also because I think that without this, I don't think that we necessarily are able to sustain other positive change. So for instance, you might begin using essential oils and taking supplements and eating really well or whatever, but if you don't really like yourself, if you don't really believe that you're worth it, often you're not going to sustain those efforts, right? So I just see it as this, this deep anchoring or planting that happens when we put down these roots, and they hold us safe and stable, so that when the winds come, it hurts, right? Somebody dies, it hurts. We get triggered by fear, it hurts or whatever, but it doesn't break us. And so that's where I start. And it's complex. It's not like a quick fix, right? This is big, putting down these roots of self-awareness and self-compassion. But that's where I start. And that's really the bulk of what I am extremely passionate about.
Yeah. I hadn't actually picked up on your previous work in the health and food industry, and that story is so similar to mine. My background is in naturopathy and functional nutrition, and I was all about food, and eating right was going to save the world and change everybody's lives. But through my work and as it's evolved, I as well have just come to realize that it's mindset is the key, and that self-love and how we talk about ourselves and to ourselves is the key, because eating well is a form of self-love. So it all comes back to that.
Well, it can be a form of self-love, or it can be a form of abuse, of jumping through hoops, of trying to measure up, of all sorts of things, right? And for me too, I always wanted, just tell me the rules, and then and I'll follow them. And so food and all of that, it can become so rigid. And what can be really defeating too is the recognition, like, I'm doing all of these things, I'm doing it all right. Why am I still lacking in joy? Why do I still feel this way? And why, so it can become a weapon, it can become weaponized. But in the right when we are coming from the motivation of just nourishing ourselves well and loving ourselves well, then it's this beautiful tool, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know that. So I like to hear that we have these similar
Yeah.
journeys.
Yeah, before we pushed record, we were talking about our surnames with the Irish, and yours is the second half is West African and mine's South African. That's quite amazing as well.
Yeah.
I love all these little ties that bring us together.
Yeah.
So you talk about showing up afraid. There's so much talk about courage and being brave, but you're talking about showing up afraid. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think, Brene Brown's work is fabulous. It's amazing and life-changing. And I think that I don't see them as two separate things. I think that showing up afraid is an act of courage. But before I ever knew about Brene Brown, or I never would have called myself a courageous person or brave, for sure not brave. And I lived with a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And, the truth is I still have fear in my life. Like there's challenges in my life and they're hard. And I never was one, I don't resonate with or connect with that language of like, be fearless and this sort of like raw. I don't know. I don't see myself in that. My clients don't see themselves in that, because what I had experienced that was life was really messy and hard. And what I needed was to know that I could still show up even though life was messy and hard. I could still have a joyful life even though there was also stress and pain. And I think I had bought into this lie that I was doing life wrong or I was broken because surely other people had figured this out and they had carved out these lives that were like stressless, like stress-free or pain-free. And of course that isn't true, right? And so what I really want to talk about is that we choose our response. We can choose to build lives that are joyful and purposeful. And even when we struggle, even if we have an autoimmune disease, even if somebody that we love is dying, even if we have other very real limitations in our lives, or we have depression, it's like, or we go into bouts of darker depression and then we come back up. It's like this idea that it's not either or, it's both and. It's both imperfect and beautiful. And so for me, that's really what I'm talking about when I say show up afraid. Don't wait for perfect. Don't wait till you have all the answers. Don't wait till life is smooth sailing, right? Don't wait till there's nothing left in your life that will stress you out or trigger you, because then like it's impossible, right? Otherwise we'll never do anything. We'll just hide.
Yeah.
And and so I really want to say like we can do both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all get caught up in that language of I'll be happy when, for some people it's when I've lost 20 kilos or when I have this house or when my children this, or, it's always these external factors that are going to, be the benchmark when we are allowed to be happy. So bringing that back to now, I love you talk about putting it down those roots. That to me just that really works. I love that visual image.
Yeah.
So okay, on one hand we talk about being enough, but you also talk about taking imperfect action. So we've just sort of touched on that. But, when you're in that place where things feel really difficult, when you're in that rut, what are some of your steps that you take or you encourage people to take that can just be the first steps out of that place?
So, so do you mean like some tips that I have to help people begin to practice self-awareness and self-compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talked a little bit about journaling and how you then shared that and how that helped you to, on a different journey. So just, some of the things that you have found that, women tuning in might find helpful.
Okay. Well, I will say, this is a caveat, I am a huge Enneagram geek. I love the Enneagram. Not sure if you're familiar with that, Edwina. Okay, I love it. And I love to use it in my work for those who are open to it. So it's a personality typing philosophy, or I don't think that's the appropriate word, but and it can really help us with this work of self-awareness. So that's just an aside, because some people might be familiar with it. Some people might want to run and Google and figure out, they could even message me and say, well, what book is your favorite? Where do I start? But that's just sort of this is an aside. But some practical, concrete tips could be, well, one of them, I actually believe that this is a good starting point, is just grappling with, or because I'm going to say grapple or wrestle, because I don't think people will believe this thought immediately necessarily, but this belief that life can be imperfect and beautiful, or you could frame it how you want. It could be a joyful, purposeful life is not a stress-free life, whatever, but just this idea that helps us break, or at least examine, this core belief that we might be holding on to that keeps us waiting, right? Deferring happiness until we get married, lose the weight, whatever. So that's the first part. Is you could create even a mantra or a phrase, something that you kind of put before your eyes every day, rehearse it, and challenge that old pattern of belief, and so that you can begin to see a new truth. I feel like that's really important. An exercise that I love to use myself, I use it every evening, and I recommend it in my classes or with clients. I'll just call it like a 3-2-1 exercise. And all it is, I love to do this at the end of the day. We take a couple deep breaths, start relaxing for sleep. You could journal it. I have a worksheet for it that I'll offer your listeners. But I actually just do it in my mind, because I like to do it as I'm kind of relaxing my body, getting ready for bed. And so the 3 is simply 3 things I'm grateful for today. And we know the power. We know this is evidence-based, right? The power of gratitude to increase our well-being and our outlook on life. So 3 things I'm grateful for today. 2 things I did well. Because remember, we're talking about self-awareness and self-compassion. This is actually remarkably hard for so many women. And you may have found that. But it's really important. And I tell people, if it takes you 20 minutes, you lay there and come up with 2 things you did well. Because even on the worst day, you did well. So 2 things you did well today. And then 1 thing I could do differently next time. This is not about judgment or criticism, because most of us have that inner critic already. But this is about possibility. This is about growth, or being growth minded. And so the reason I add that is because we want to realize that we choose our response in life, right? That we have what it takes. And we need to be reminded of that. So let's say that a mama listening today, that she yells at her kids a lot, and it makes her so sad, and she really wants to break that habit. And it's hard. It can take a while. So let's say that her 1 thing might be to identify, well, next time when the kids are fighting and I'm feeling like I'm going to just fall apart, I start doing the silly dance and start bringing in humor, So she's chosen 1 concrete option, 1 possibility that she could do. So it's not like, oh, I wish I didn't yell today, because that's just negative, right? It doesn't build up. So instead, we're choosing 1 positive action that we could do next time. So I hope that's clear. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I really am a huge fan of practicing purposeful rest or pleasure. And I mean, as opposed to fake rest. So I know for me, that inner critic, if I'm laying on the couch trying to, let's say I'm trying to read or go for a walk or whatever, a lot of us, we have that voice that says, well, you should be doing this, and the dishes aren't done, and, you could be writing another blog post, and it's like, yap, yap, yap. But learning to awaken to those voices, first of all, because a lot of us are so much on autopilot that that's just the running script, and we're not even aware of how mean we are, like, to ourselves. Like, we're just so awakening to that, and then saying, no, I'm choosing this right now. It's on purpose, and I'm letting go of shame or guilt. And we can tie that into self-care, right? But self-care, like we were talking about food and supplements, how it can become almost one more thing to check off the list. It's like, you're a good girl if. So I love to reframe it and think, what do you want or need? Even that question, even if you ask yourself a few times a day, you pause to check in and say, what do I really want or need right now? Maybe it's a mug of tea. Maybe it's, go sit out in the sun for a few minutes. Maybe it's text your girlfriend. And so we start practicing purposeful rest and pleasure, and noticing when the inner chatter comes up, and then releasing it. And so I think that can actually be, it's simple, right? But it can feel hard. Like, people actually have a remarkably hard time because we have these ruts of thought and behavior, and it's hard to break that. Let me look. Well, one more I'll mention. I don't even know how many I've said, but one more. And they can find this in my free handout that I've made for them. It's the act of learning to shift our thoughts. So, and again, this is hard work. Like, it's simple in theory, but we have to practice. So when we have thoughts that come up, like, it could be anything. It could be, I'm not good enough. What's the point? It could be even just, I'm afraid, like, whatever. When we have these thoughts that are entrenched, and they hold us back, they keep us in fear, they keep us hiding, they keep us in addictive patterns of behavior, they keep us numbing out. And we know that we want to learn to show up more fully to life, then we will be required to learn how to challenge and examine our thoughts, right? Like, that we talked about the power of mindset, how both of us realize this is like core, this is foundational work. And so in my handout, I have an exercise that people can walk through with a couple of examples. It can be, honestly, it's best, I think, to work with somebody. I think the ideal is for this, you work with somebody. Because we're often very blind to our shadow. It can go so much quicker if somebody else can help us observe what's up and give us some new possibilities. But basically, I would, even just a simple thing, even without using my worksheet or anything, I'll just offer this one idea. And I used it when I mentioned about 5 years ago, when I was in a very, very dark place, and I needed to work really hard. I was working with a psychologist. I was doing all sorts of things to care for myself well, but I had to challenge my dark thoughts multiple times a day. And I would just use my phone, my iPhone, and open up the notes app. And all I would do in the moment was this negative kind of dark thought would come up, and I would type it out and say, what I'm thinking is this, or what I'm believing is this, but what I'm choosing to believe instead is, and I would just type out one other possibility. And I would do that sometimes 18 times a day, because that's the space I was in. But it was like life-changing, just life-changing, because it meant that I was no longer believing automatically the thoughts that would pop into my brain. We shouldn't believe every thought that pops into our brain, right? And it just opens the door a crack to hope or light or joyful possibility. And so those are some action steps that people can put into play.
So powerful. And there's so many bits in there. I love that you talked about that choice. It's a choice. And I know, so often I've been in a place of complete resentment. I can't believe I've had to, and now I have to make dinner. And when I came to the realization that changing my language and saying, well, I'm choosing to make dinner for my family with love rather than, oh, I have to do this. You know, I actually could choose to sit on the couch. Nobody's going to die if I don't feed them tonight. I don't make that choice because I'm choosing to make dinner tonight. And as soon as I just became aware of these little language tweaks that I could use in my own head, the way I felt about it and the way I started to approach everything differently, just it's life-changing. And as you talked about, you know, so many of these things are really simple. They're not easy to do, and it takes practice, but they are really simple. We keep looking for these, you know, these magic pills or these, you know, great philosophical ideas or something, you know, grand that's going to come across our path to make everything easier. But it's really the simple things that make the world of difference. The language that we're using.
Yeah, I agree. You know, another example, because I feel like, because I think that story is powerful, and many of the women tuning in may need to just hear like that, you know, these simple ideas that they can put into play, right? So when one of my daughters is a pianist and we had to travel, there was no teacher where we live, and we had to travel constantly for her, you know, her lessons and festivals, and she adored piano. And I would find myself, I was a little overwhelmed, and it was a very busy season of life, and I didn't really want to be in the car all the time. And I remember so clearly the day I just realized, Krista, wait a second, you want this. You love supporting her in her passion. You get to connect with her one-on-one every time you get on the highway. And I just reframed it, and I was like, oh, I'm choosing this. And like, even if you feel the difference in your body, what happens, it's really transformative. Like, so yeah, I agree. And I love that the awareness, the self-awareness part simply means that we wake up. We are awake to the truth of how we're showing up, and that does mean the hard stuff too, you know. And but also we awaken to the choice. We awaken to the beauty right in our lives right now that we may be missing, simply because we're so discouraged about one part of life that we fail to see the 80% that's incredible.
You know, you spoke before about, you know, you don't believe every thing that your thoughts are telling you, and that our subconscious brain doesn't know the difference between a truth and a lie, and we can use that for positive as well. And this is something that I taught my kids when they were really little, is that if you smile broadly, it changes the way your body feels all over, and your body doesn't know that you're faking it. And I find that, you know, even my biggest worry time is often 3:00 in the morning. That is my worry hour. If I've got a lot on my plate, that's when I'll wake up and start chewing over all the things that I can possibly worry about in my life. And a little trick that I've learned is that I make myself smile. So I'm lying in the dark in bed, my husband's sound asleep, and I'm grinning broadly. And, you know, just doing that makes me kind of giggle, and it shifts that energy.
I would like to see a picture of that.
The things we share, but that's the purpose of these conversations, because we're all having nutty moments, be them dark or joyful, and the more we can share them, the more we can acknowledge that and say, well, you know, give this a go, it works for me. I think that's really powerful. That's why I love doing these interviews.
It makes me think too, this idea that you know, the laughter, you know, the laughter is this amazingly potent medicine. And I love to belly laugh. I'm a fairly serious person, you know, often in my head, very introverted, but I love to belly laugh. And something that was really healing, and I use this as one, you know, earlier I was talking about purposeful rest or purposeful self-care. Well, laughing is one of my go-tos. So in the middle of like really hard things, I actually learned when my mom was dying I began to learn this idea that I had permission to laugh. I had permission even when somebody I loved was dying.
Yeah.
That, you know, even when we're really worried, we have a child who's very sick, we can laugh together. You know, one thing, it was this phenomenon that I thought was kind of bizarre, but now I see maybe it's just instinct, was my family buried a lot of people, and we'd gather, and my siblings and I would gather, and after the funeral, my cousins and my siblings, we would just like laugh, and I thought, like, is this bizarre? But I realized, no, this is our instinct, this is our body and our mind and our spirit wanting to be whole.
Yeah.
Like, we're allowed to laugh, we have permission to see joy and to taste pleasure even when life is not perfect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think, I just wonder if there's other people too who just need to know, like, you're allowed to laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you tap into that when you need to, you know, or when you want to use that kind of laughter as a therapy? How do you, you know, like I often think of that, and I want to find a funny movie to watch or something. But, you know, what are some of the ways that you tap into that to kind of bring that laughter to the surface? Have you got a few tricks that you use?
I don't think I have thought about this before though, but I
Mm.
don't think I have any tricks. I literally, like, I actually do think like silly shows. Like right
Yeah.
now I'm watching The Office, which I've never watched before. My big kids loved it and whatever. And it makes me laugh. Like I do think that
Mm.
that helps, something like that. I also think, honestly, for me, I love, like, my older daughter, for instance, will send me these sarcastic memes and things like that, and or one of my sisters will, and it's just like those little connections, like in the middle of whatever's going on, that it's just the permission, and then we just, you know, we love sarcasm, so we sort of are, we just, it's
Yeah.
the permission first. For me, it's
Yeah.
all about the permission, and then I find things. So it's like sarcastic memes or like a show. I don't have any other like magic bullet for that. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's more, but even like connecting with our family, like, I think if we just, honestly, it's like, because I choose to see this, or to believe this truth, that life can be hard and painful and messy and also incredibly beautiful, it just opens up opportunity, you know, it just opens up opportunity.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I have no magic pill, but I do think that a show can be a good way, you know,
Yeah.
even when you're grieving, you know, you turn on a show and maybe you sob through one show and that's cathartic, and then maybe there's a funny one that just, it helps you practice laughing when you've forgotten how.
Yeah. I for the women tuning into this, they'll know I've said this many times, but where your attention goes, energy flows. And so if you're looking for reasons to laugh,
Yeah,
if you're looking for reasons to be joyful, if you're looking for the beauty in your life,
yeah,
you will start to see it. And it's just, you know, it is one of those simple practices. So I know you've touched on it. You have a lovely gift for our audience. Would you just tell them what that is, please?
yeah. So I just called it a self-compassion workbook. So it's just a series of some pretty worksheets that would walk you through some of the things that we've chatted about. So the 3-2-1 exercise, there's a gratitude worksheet, my shift your thoughts worksheets, and this self-care checklist, which has things like I laughed today on it, you know, so it's not just about what you eat or things like that. And I've tried to add some ideas that you may not naturally go towards when we're talking about self-care.
Yeah.
But so they're just some of the worksheets that I use with my clients. And I don't even require you to give me your email address to sign up. You can just have it for free. And then if you want more, of course, I would love you to join my email list, but it's there for the taking. You can print it out, begin to use it. I do recommend, if you are in a place where you're struggling in particular, I highly recommend that you actually do put pencil to paper.
Yeah.
So we have a tendency to want to do things in our head, but if we actually need to break or disrupt a pattern of thought and behavior, we cannot do it just by doing it in our head. So we need to kind of get even what I was doing, putting, typing on my phone, that at least was still better than trying to do it in my head.
Yeah.
But even if you can do it for a while on paper, that's even better.
Yeah.
So print it out, put them into practice, and start to notice, how you start to feel differently and what you're noticing about yourself, and use it just as sort of a dipping your toes into this idea of putting down your stronger, healthier roots of
Yeah.
self-awareness and self-compassion.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because knowledge without action is useless. We can tune into all these inspiring podcasts or interviews or books or whatever it is, but just taking one little piece from it and actually putting something into action, that's where the transformation starts to happen. So I hope that the mums will make the most of your beautiful gift and just start to write things down, because it makes such a difference. So Krista, on your perfect morning, a beautiful morning, because I am such a big believer in how we start the day sets the tone for the day. How do you love to start the day?
Well, it's nothing fancy at all. And I feel like where I live, it's like 8 months of winter. So which means that I'm not like sitting outside in the sunshine. It's cold here. So, so what I like to do is, before I ever leave my bed, I like to just identify 3 things that I'm grateful for. So I begin and end my day with gratitude. And then I choose I'll get out of bed, my agenda's there, I have a look, and I choose my top 3 priorities for the day. And they might be about work, but they may not be, because my work is tangled up with my life. It's not more important. And so, my top 3 priorities might be that I really need to connect with one of my kids. It might be that I desperately need a long walk today. Who knows, but my top 3 priorities for the day. And then I love to putter. I have an hour where, before I start work, I love to kind of putter, check my menu plan, and do a little bit of tidy up in the kitchen, make a coffee. And then, because it's winter here much of the year, I use a light lamp, and I'll sit there and use the light lamp. It's important for my mood health, my mood balance. And then I kind of dive into work if it's a work day. Yeah. So pretty basic.
No, I think it's those basic routines that work. It's beautiful. As we've been talking, the light has shifted in your window, and you've got this beautiful light from the heavens coming down across your screen. Oh, it's really pretty. So the sun must be shining to some degree.
Yeah, it's cloudier, but yeah, it's just hitting the right spots right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you able to share your morning? Because maybe I'll hear it on another interview. I don't know if you've shared your morning.
Oh, that's lovely. Nobody's asked me. Thank you.
I'd love to know.
Yeah, look, I have on my perfect morning, I'm a morning person, which is a relatively new thing. It's just been the last couple of years. So I'm up at 5:30, and I generally spend the first hour diving into feedback from clients and looking at what people are up to. And I've got quite a lot of my contacts are overseas in a completely different time zone, and so that's when I can check in and sometimes have a conversation with friends overseas. And then I spend an hour from 6:30 till 7:30, and that's when I get outside. And it's pretty cold here at the moment, but I still love it, and I go for a walk for an hour, and I make the most of that time to tune into the voices of women that inspire me. So it might be my coach, it might be Brene Brown, it might be Christiane Northrup. I'm currently listening to her book, The Ageless Goddess, which is gorgeous. Any voices that lift me up and inspire me to keep going and feeling really positive in my life. And then I come back, my kids are up at 7:30, getting them ready for school, and I love my morning coffee. So my husband makes me a coffee every morning, and almost without fail, I take 10 minutes or so to sit down with my morning coffee before my life gets into crazy busy mode. So I that's pretty much my every morning, and I love it. Thank
Nice.
you for asking.
Yeah, I love to know what works in other people's lives, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
how
I'm a ritual person. I love little rituals. They give me my little bursts of joy, and I've got little rituals that happen throughout my day. And yeah, it just gives me something to look forward to. I love it. And my morning coffee is one of them.
Nice. Yeah, I
Yeah,
forgot to mention that I often, as I'm puttering, I'm listening to a podcast.
yeah.
But yeah, I
Yeah,
love
fantastic.
podcasts.
Thank you so much for being part of this series. I'm truly grateful to have had you here, and hopefully we will do this again.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. Yeah, it was fun to connect. So,
All right, bye for now.
bye.